Hello? Hello? Well, you know who I am. I just want to thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. I want to say thank you to my family and my friends who have gotten me through a couple of 4 hard weeks, really, really hard. My sister, who came the furthest from Colorado, has spoken to me every day for about an hour, I think. And I have friends. I set records for how long can you talk on the phone to people. So I just want you to know, from my perspective, if you have a friend who is grieving, make the phone call, send the text, send the email, whatever, okay? I have really, really appreciated it. I have done much better, I think, because of that, than I would be doing. Eric has a couple of cousins in New York who could not join us, so Judy and Susie, it's a shout out to you guys. I hope you're on the live stream. I'm sorry you couldn't be here with us, but we of course are thinking about you. Sometimes people commented on the age difference between Eric and me, and it wasn't that great. It was 11 years. But I always said that he was immature for his age, and I was mature for my age, and somehow we met in the middle and made it work. A lot of Eric's life, especially after he retired, but even leading up to retirement, his spinning classes meant an awful lot to him. His army, his legion of spinners loomed very large in his life. And one of them, he taught at the Y and he taught at the JCC. And one of his spinners at the JCC, who could not join us today, shout out to Diane Horn, hi, wrote me some very lovely emails. And the last one she wrote about him as she tried to explain Eric to her son. And I thought she really got it, like she really nailed him as far as all of his spinners are concerned. And I asked her permission if I could share her note with you today. And she said, I tried explaining Eric to my son yesterday, not an easy task. But he smiled when I told him Eric enlightened me on rock bands, mostly Rolling Stones. He asked if I liked that music, and I told him I can at least tolerate it, thanks to Eric. However, the volume is something I will never get accustomed to. As a matter of fact, thanks to Eric, I discovered earplugs. Can do wonders to save your hearing. Most of Eric's games and comments were to get a reaction out of people, but in the end, he just wanted to be provocative and loved. He succeeded. I watched him win people over who were totally turned off by his music and comments initially, but ended up bantering with him and trying to be successful at his music games. He definitely had a way with people that was unconventional, but won them over. He will be missed. So thank you, Diane. I just thought that just really captured him, especially as far as his spinners went. Eric and I had a lot of adventures through the years, and it was magnificent. And of course, a lot of them were with family and with the grandchildren. We shared that love of adventures with the grandchildren, but then Eric and I got excited if we went to Costco to have a hot dog too. I mean, we were just like that. Or if there was a good movie we were going to see, that was an adventure. So I do miss him in that way. We put out some of his needlepoint, and this is hardly any of his work. This is one teeny tiny little sample. You may not know this, but he was a precision stitcher. And whenever we would go into the needlepoint shops, I mean, he was the darling of all the women in the needlework shops. Because you know what he looked like and how he acted, and here he did this stunningly exquisite, precise stitching. So all of that over there is just a tiny sample of the inventory I have at the house. There were so many frame pieces that he did that eventually, and also anybody who knows us well or who has been to our home knows that we have a lot of art. So between trying to display the art we loved and then put up his magnificent pieces, it was really hard to do. And so at some point I said to him, you got to start doing some like seasonal type stuff, you know, where we bring it out and then we can take it back. So that's why I brought a sampling of his Christmas work. I'll leave you with I'll share one story with you that sort of is very indicative of him. In 1996, I took Eric home to meet my parents. And I really did try to prepare them for Eric. You're so right. And I described him to them, but all they remembered was he works for Wilmington Trust Bank. I guess that's all they heard, because trust me, I really tried to describe him. You know, we walk in, he's got on the loud, colorful shorts, his hair's in a ponytail, he's got some loud, like what Max is wearing, t-shirt on. And we spent the weekend with my parents, came back to Wilmington, and the first phone call I get in my office on Monday is my mother. And so my mother calls, and I said, so Mom, what do you think? She says, well, like your father said, we expected a yuppie, and we got a hippie. True story. I'm like, what are you talking about? I told you what he was like. All he heard was banker. So I'll leave you with that, because that was one of my favorite stories ever. I'd like to bring up our granddaughter, Molly. Eric loved the Rolling Stones. He loved the Muppets. He loved, and he really loved Kermit the Frog. So Molly is going to sing Rainbow Connection and accompany herself on the ukulele.
So we've been told, and some choose to believe it. I know the wrong way to see. Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. Who said that every wish will be heard and answered, and wished on a morning star? Somebody thought of that, and someone believed him. Look what it's done so far. What's so amazing that keeps us stargazing? What do we think we might see? Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers.
Hi, my name is Max, and I'm Eric's grandson. My sister Molly and I are the inspiration for the term poobah. Poobah was the name our grandfather chose for himself, which was fine up until around middle school. Our poobah was an amazing guy. He was such a huge part of our lives. He never missed a game of ours, and that's saying a lot because sometimes Molly and I would have been happy to miss a game or two of ours, but not our poobah. He was always there, always cheering us on, and that's something we will never forget. Aside from never missing a game, he was sometimes our ride home. And when our parents couldn't pick us up from school, whenever he would be picking us up from school that day, usually on a Tuesday, it would always be made very clear that we were getting picked up by our poobah. We always feared that our friends might hear, and we didn't want to have to explain. So Molly and I would always respond with, "I'm sorry, who is that?" "Oh, grandfather." "Oh, okay." Yeah. So this guy, whatever you want to call him, he was a great guy. Most of you probably already know what he was to me, to Molly, Victor. He always spoke so highly of us, all the time. But he was also an important part of some other people's lives. People like my Aunt Susie, who couldn't be here today. Susie was Eric's first cousin, and she basically grew up with him. Susie sent a letter to us, and I'm going to read a little bit from that. As you know, Eric was like a big brother to me. We spent every single Sunday of our young years together at Grammy and Grandpa's, and he spent so many weekends at our house in White Plains from as far back as I can recall. Then from his teens on, he'd stay up till 2 or 3 a.m. with Aunt Edith/Ida after everyone else had gone to bed. He held a place in my mom's heart no one else ever did, really like a son, and vice versa. That was true of his entire Block Mantell family. Eric spent so many Christmases with us, trips to Playland, hanging out and playing outside, and whenever he came to visit, the whole world stopped. Actually, just as it did for you. Oh, sorry, this is too... That doesn't really make sense in this context. This is... Yeah, okay. Where are we? We'd all cancel plans to be 100% free to spend every minute with our smart, incredibly kind, handsome, funny, athletic, artistic big cousin. He did the same. This was pre-cell phones, and whenever he was with us, his entire focus was on us, and he made his younger cousins feel so special. In fact, my friends would always come over to see him. Last night, I called my childhood friend Betsy to tell her that Eric was gone. She was so sad. She'd met him many times, and she really understood what his loss is for me. I might have played it for you, but I have an audio recording of my father in the Army during World War II when Eric was a toddler. The message is a love letter to Aunt Edith, but at the end, he spoke to Eric saying, maybe when all this business is over, meaning the war, Eric will take us for a ride in his car. Being a city kid, I'm guessing my parents took him for rides, and Eric must have really recently gotten a toy car. He was Moose Morrison at Riverdale and Eki to me. Eric walked me down the aisle when I was married and took me on vacations to the beach so I could spend time with you bugs. Oh, shit. This is, I mean, all right. This is just starting to get a little less relevant to everybody else. Okay, your mother would drive me down to the shore with you. Then mid-vacation, Eric would come down and swap with your mother. And I'd have beach time with you and with him. He'd take me out to dinner in Boston in my college years and in D.C., his law school years. He'd dress in a three-piece suit, always opening car doors, etc., and I felt so grown up. Do you remember his amazing collection of sport jackets and sweaters? He did love clothes. Then, years later, there was our Las Vegas meetup for after the healing began. I was in Las Vegas on business, and he flew out from Arizona for dinner, and he got tickets to Cirque du Soleil. I have more memories of Eric and our whole family growing up than I could ever list. Thank goodness for the photos my mom and Hazel, Francis, and Grammy kept.
Okay, here goes. Is this too loud? Okay, all right. Sorry. Hi, my name is Carrie, and I'm Eric's daughter-in-law. And for that, I consider myself to be very, very lucky. It's a very prestigious title I've had the distinct honor to hold for the past 20 years, and I can assure you I've cherished this coveted role with every ounce of my being, and my heart is so full. I'm sorry. I can't actually do it like that. I can't. If Eric were here right now, I could hear him going, So I won't do it like that. Not like that. I'm going to do it this way, the way Eric would want it. Yo, I'm Carrie. I'm Eric's daughter-in-law, and I'm going to talk about him. You see, he wasn't one for flowery language, Eric. Flowery tights, yes. Flowery words, not so much. Curse words, fuck yeah. Sorry if that offends anyone, but you know what? Eric wouldn't be sorry. You know he wouldn't, and that was okay. Eric was very real. Always real, always himself. Very true to himself. And everyone that loved him for it. He was in speech, no nonsense. Blunt doesn't even really do it justice. But in thought and in deed, he truly did wear his heart on his sleeve, and probably on his leggings, and possibly in his hair at some point. But truly the funny thing about Eric was, while his words kept it super simple and really straightforward, his actions told the story of a man who really was just a big old softie. Sorry, Eric, but it's true. The very first time I met him, though, he was hard to read. So keep in mind, he didn't show up to the meeting in workout gear, just regular, relatively low-key Eric street clothes. So our first meeting was a few weeks into Burke and I dating, somewhere back in 1997. Wow. So Burke and I met Eric and Shelley for dinner at Kid Shalene's. I was nervous, of course. And Shelley was, warmer than Eric, but Eric was very nice, of course. But again, hard to read. So Burke excuses himself to use the bathroom, and here I am left alone with these people. And I can't get a good read. I feel intimidated. So I take a chance. I lean in, pause, look them both in the eye, and ask, so, what do you think of Burke? They looked a little confused at first, and then laughed and said something like, well, you know, we're big fans, or whatever. But the ice was broken. I got Eric, and he got me. That set the tone for a very fun relationship, one full of very strong opinions, i.e. any discussion we've ever had regarding music. But also very, very cool ways that Eric would essentially wear his heart on his sleeve. He showed his approval, his love, his excitement through his actions, if not through his words. Some examples, he built some absolutely beautiful pieces of furniture for us over the years. I have a highboy, which, you know, is a dresser, in my dining room because I can't bear to have it in my bedroom where people can't see it. It's just so beautiful that I want to show it off. So I keep placemats and tablecloths and candles in it, whatever. Another thing he built was a cradle that I will never part with. He built it once he learned that his role as father-in-law would be upgraded to grandfather, or the term that he settled on, poobah. He also, another wonderful part of Eric, he pretty much became our professional and our own personal photographer. Once the kids were born, he would come over, and then the next time we would see him, we would be presented with just a whole full portfolio of all these beautiful pictures that he would take for us. He also made beautiful needle points, works of art in the form of Christmas stockings, tooth fairy pillows, pillows for, you know, the bed, just beautiful decorations, and so much more. He also planned countless trips and excursions, adventures, all designed to keep us entertained and engaged and together. Wow, that's a lot to wear on one sleeve. But if anybody could pull it off, that would be Eric. That was Poobah. Thank you.
Thank you guys all for coming out today. For those of you who don't know, my name is Burke Morrison, better known as the father of Eric's grandchildren. I, by definition, knew my father my entire life, 50 years. Susie and Judy, I think are listening, were kind enough to share some stories and some pictures of the period of time before I got to know him. And you'll see some of the pictures coming up on the slideshow here from his youth with his family from New York. And I hope everybody is seemingly adhering to what I consider the Eric Morrison rule. Which is, there are to be no tears. Tears should be saved for something sad. My father had a rich and privileged life and did what he wanted, and there's nothing sad about that. He had a family that loved him. A lot of friends, too. Going through some of the Facebook postings that everybody gave, and some comments from the visitation the other day, and just a general sense of my father, I realized that nobody can agree on what he was. Unconventional, that was one. Unique, one of a kind. Now you're being redundant. Legend, icon, a good man, a cool guy, a special guy. I think we're getting redundant, folks. Come on, we try to come up with something a little more original. He was a cool dude. He was a cool dad. He was the coolest. Okay, I get it. Cool goes alongside the description of my father. He was a maniac. This wasn't so nice, but in case you didn't know him, it works. He was a trailblazer. He was an amazing person. And most recently, well, just moments before I came up here, he was described as a real character. That was you. I think everybody could agree that there's not one word that can really sum up this man. If you looked at the slideshow, just the number of haircuts he had over the years when he had hair, and then the number of versions of I'm losing my hair cuts. He was somebody that, just really, he was always keeping everybody on their toes, not knowing what to expect from him next. But when I think of trying to come up with a description of my father, he was a man who climbed mountains. And sometimes you hear people say something like that. It's a metaphor. They did things in life. They achieved. They rose through the ranks. They achieved high levels of success. This fucking asshole climbed mountains. Really. Big ones. I'm not talking about the Poconos. I'm talking about the Canadian Rockies, the American Rockies, Alaska, South America, the Patagonia region, the Andes in Bolivia and Peru. He climbed mountains. Brought me on along for a couple of those trips. And I can tell you, when you look at some of these pictures of him with those axes and those ropes, they're real. But he, like a lot of people I think have tried to describe him, have trouble, as I described some of the things that people have said. I think that one had to come up now. Really? I think if I had to come up with one word, and I'm going to explain it, but the one word, he was an oxymoron. Children know. Private school education, and they think I just called him a dumb guy that likes to clean a lot with Oxy soap. My father was an oxymoron, though. He was a walking oxymoron. Later, he was a rolling oxymoron. He was an introvert. Those of you who know him, and thank you for timing that for the pink tutu. He was a man, he was an introvert, and he was a quiet man. He wore lace tights, flowered shorts, and apparently at least once a poodle skirt. Some of you saw that picture already, but it'll come up eventually. He was a quiet man who loved nothing more than reading a book or doing needlepoint, but could shake the rafters off of any building with his workout shouts and his heart-stopping sneezes. He loved to dance and had all of the rhythm of a drunk monkey on Quaaludes. You will see those videos. He made me promise that I would not ever show them in public. Sorry, I lied. He loved music, and we've all talked about his passion for the Rolling Stones. In case you're wondering, there's a quiz at the end of the slideshow. How many Rolling Stones logos appear in the 287 slides? So start counting. It's more than 2. But he loved music, but he was relegated to playing the triangle in his high school band, because it was considered the least, the one piece of equipment that he could least screw up. And if he did, no one would know because it was the triangle. And he was also told only to move his lips and not to sing in his high school chorus. These are true stories. And when you see anybody who ever took one of his classes and heard him try to sing, he got an A for effort and enthusiasm. I think that we all could accept that, but he was tone deaf. He taught spinning classes for decades. And for the first 65 years of his life, he couldn't ride a bike. Also a true story. He couldn't ride a bike and only learned upon finding out that his grandchildren were going to need to learn how to ride a bike. My mother, his first wife, once told me that she tried for years to teach him. He grew up in New York City and just never needed to learn how to ride a bike. And you'll see a picture coming up on the slideshow of him teaching me how to ride a bike. He's not teaching me. There's training wheels, and he stepped into the picture just so he could look like he knew what he was doing. That's true, too. But he couldn't ride a bike, never learned to ride a bike. My mom tried to teach him. After the third trip to the emergency room, she said, "I'm done." And so it took several more years, and Shelley to, I guess, push him along and maybe hold him up a little bit along the way. But he did eventually learn, and one of the most iconic pictures of him is in his biking Rolling Stone shirt with a bicycle. I've always gotten a kick out of that one. He, again, an oxymoron. He was a mountain climber who was afraid of heights. He was afraid of heights. But this is how this man operated. If there was something that got in his way, he would take it on and figure out a way to get through. 65 years to learn how to ride a bike, but he kept trying till he figured it out. Scared of heights? Come on, Rocky Mountains. Come on, Mount McKinley. What do you got? I'm Eric Morrison. And that's just the way he approached things. On a personal level, he was a very personable man of quick wit and high intellect, who generally disliked people. Nobody in this room, but everybody out there he didn't like, but not you. And then the last little oxymoron of him, well, I'm going to do two more. He was a hippie who missed Woodstock, but that was my fault. I was born in August of 1969, and 1 month before it was Woodstock, and my father, against his preferred judgment, if not better judgment, decided to stay home in case I came early and was there to support my mom. So I kind of blame myself for him missing Woodstock. But he was also a hippie who hated the Grateful Dead. So explain that one. The last one is, and we've talked about some of the things that he wore. That's his mother. So you can see the apple didn't fall from the tree on that one. But one time, very early on in Carrie and I's relationship, I was having a party. Some of the pictures, you can see some of the pictures from some of the parties that we had. We had Halloween parties and different things. And someone of Carrie's acquaintance, who's going to remain nameless unless he says I can say it, saw my father walk into the kitchen and looked over and said, "Oh, what's my gay aerobics instructor doing here?" Anyone want to claim it? Go ahead, you're here. So my sister-in-law, upon meeting my father for the first time, declared, "What's my gay aerobics instructor doing here?" To which my wife, my girlfriend at the time, says, "Shh, that's his dad, that's his dad." So, I mean, I'm here, so he's not totally gay. Still can't figure the tutu out, though. Anyway, I had an amazing experience with my father. Throughout my life, I had the opportunity to to know him in a way, I guess, that sometimes is a little different from a lot of kids. I was an only child, and my parents divorced at a relatively young age. I was around 6 years old. And every week, as part of the agreement that they had come to, I had dinner with my father once a week, one night a week. And so I had a lot of one-on-one time without distraction. You know, the waiter would come and say, do you want another soda, Mr. Young man? But other than that, so we had a lot of one-on-one time. But at that age, it's kind of a little hard. What do you talk about? First grade, second grade, third grade. Is he going to tell me about all the bad people at work that, messed up his analysis and his projections for the year? No, I mean, it was kind of weird. So we came up with weird things to talk about. As I got a little bit older, probably around 10 or 12, I don't know how we got on the subject, but he told me, I asked him, how during World War II? Yeah, I know, it's a weird question, I get it. But how, during World War II, how did we get all those tanks over to Europe? And they're so big. I mean, if you put it on a boat, the boat would sink. My dad said, they took the road and the bridge. The what? Yeah, no, they built a bridge. And went out of Maine, up through Canada, and then across Greenland. And then they made a very long floating bridge that connected to somewhere in Northern Europe. What? They did not. Oh no, absolutely, yeah. And they had filling stations along the way, so as they ran out of gas, they could just keep them full and keep them moving. And the Germans couldn't touch it. Really? So one would think that at age 10 or 12, something like that would be told to you and you would just sort of dismiss it and forget about it and not worry about it. But no, I had to double down in 8th grade. While discussing in history class World War II, Mr. Johnson, what about the bridge? What bridge, Burke? Well, the bridge. The bridge that goes from northern Maine into Greenland and Iceland and into Northern Europe, where they carried all the bombs and tanks and stuff. Still haven't forgiven you for that one, Dad. Nope, not gonna forgive you for that one because, boy, did you make me look like an idiot. And Max was talking about somewhere around the age of, middle school, finding poobah to be an uncomfortable thing in front of your friends. Try telling all your friends in 8th grade that you think there's a bridge that goes to Europe. It doesn't go well. But over time, he came to all the games. The kids talked about that as a grandfather, but he did it also as a father, a working father who had a job. I think it was kind of important. It was like money and banking and like people's retirements and stuff that he was helping to figure out. And yet he almost never missed a game. And on top of it, he was the unofficial team photographer. By the way, another oxymoron, loved to take pictures, never learned how to use a camera. But he was never not there, and he took pictures, and half the kids in my class on their yearbook page had a photograph of them playing sports that my father took. Not because he was getting paid for it, but just because he liked to do it. And he was generous in that way. But as time went on, there were sports and there were performances and things like that. There were trips. You can see some of the trips that we took, and he carried that on to my children. He and I went to Canada, Alaska, Montana, Wyoming, Washington. We did. We went to Arizona to the Grand Canyon, Bolivia, Peru, just places that are people just don't get a chance to see, and I saw them. And he did a lot of those same things with my kids, and I'm grateful for that. which is why at dinner one night, shortly after I'd gotten engaged, I reached out to my father for some advice about selecting a best man. I had 3 very close friends, any of whom would have fit the job. I was kind of thinking out loud about doing something maybe a little unconventional, and right in the middle of my ramblings, he just looked at me, he said, "Yes." "Yes, what, Dad?" "I'll do it." Yep. And at the time, I was like, God, who has their father be their best man? And then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, why shouldn't he be my best man? He's the most logical choice. And it's just because it wasn't normal or traditional to have your father do it that I'd never thought of it. And as soon as he said it, I was like, wow. But what I didn't realize